What happens when a soldier returning home is greeted with an email divorce and an empty bank account? He keeps quiet. And then he checkmates those who thought he'd given up. You know, when I woke up in a hot, smelly hangar somewhere on the outskirts of Baghdad, with my feet stiff from sweat-soaked socks and the sound of a helicopter splitting my head open, I thought it couldn't get any worse. Well, I was wrong. Because worse is when you open an old tablet that used to hold videos of your son with his bike and messages from your wife about how much she misses you, and now there it is, notice of divorce. And not a word, not, I'm sorry, not, I couldn't wait any longer, not, I'm hurt. Just an electronic signature. My name is James Thorne, captain in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. I've treated guys who got their arms ripped off. I've nursed sergeants shaking from third-degree burns. I've gone where even God closed up shop a long time ago. Meanwhile, my legal spouse, Christine, was remotely erasing me from her life like an old Excel spreadsheet with the wrong password. You're probably thinking, well, maybe they haven't gotten along in a long time, things have cooled off. Well, yeah. Except 2 weeks ago, she sends me a picture of her son with the caption, "We're proud of you." Then 7 days later, bam, you're no longer my husband. No texting, no registration. I sat in the tent holding that PDF like it was a time bomb. I didn't even know pain could be so neat. Like a surgically clean incision, no screaming, but deep internal bleeding. I stood up silently, walked outside. Sergeant Mason was there, smoking by the van. He took one look at me and said, "Hey, Captain, you all right?" I looked at him like he was asking me if I liked living without skin. And I didn't say anything. Because I didn't know where to start. And then I went to the bank's personal account. And what do you think? $82,000 down. Every last dime. The money I'd been saving since I'd been in the service, every vacation, every day I hadn't worked. It's all gone into an account with a different name. Isn't that a miracle? So much for the Army bonus. While you're fighting, you're zeroed out. I texted her. Just one message. Why? There was no reply. Not an hour later. Not the next day. Just a read notification. As if even replying was too expensive. Or too uncomfortable a conversation. I started asking around. Looked for the name of the recipient of the bill. Found it. Ryan Ellis. 39 years old. Real estate agent. Used to show up at our parties when Christina was still working at the mortgage agency. Always with coffee in hand and a hygienist's smile. Guess who her new lease is registered to? He's the contact person. He's the new partner. He knows the system. I didn't make a scene. I didn't snap. I just started packing. Like on the battlefield. See the wounded first, then stop the bleeding. And then count the casualties. On the third day, I contacted Andrew, an old friend, a lawyer. He'd been out of the Army 2 years. Calm as a surgeon with 30 years of experience. Andrew, I need to understand what's going on here. This isn't a divorce. This is an operation to take over everything while I'm not looking. He listened. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You already have more evidence than half my clients." If he was acting as a consultant, and she was signing papers in his office, then we have a pattern. Sounds like it's not the first time he's done this. That's when I realized I wasn't just betrayed. I was screwed, with a piece of paper in one hand and a smile on my face. I asked Andrew to start collecting requests. Transactions. Sales. Powers of attorney. Everything. I went back to the tent. I lay down. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling. And I kept saying to myself, "You're not broken. You won't be like them. You're gonna do the right thing." And let all that rightness fall apart at the seams. The next day I got up as usual, at 5:30, out of Army habit, even though there were no orders, no alarm, just silence and the taste of cheap coffee from the military canteen. You know, that coffee tastes like resentment. Because when you drink it after you've been electronically written off from your family, it's not invigorating. It reminds you. I opened old correspondence with Christina. In September she wrote, "I'm so lonely without you." In October, "The school bill is paid, thank you." And in November, complete silence. I can see why. Because in November she was already preparing documents while I was thinking how to send her a parcel with souvenirs and drawings from local children. I called the bank again, asking for copies of all account activity. The girl on the other end of the line answered with the same polite apathy with which one usually tells about unavailable bonuses. Transactions confirmed. All legitimate, sir. Signatures verified. Where was the verification? Remote ID system. Who verified it? We're keeping it confidential. Of course you don't. Especially when it smells like a scheme. Ryan Ellis wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a divorce support specialist, according to his profile on one of the freelance platforms. Yeah, there's even such a thing. Help with legal issues, transaction processing, emotional support. Not a licensed attorney, in parentheses. I started writing everything down, dates, amounts, account movements, bank login IP addresses. And the cherry on the cake, a deed of temporary trust signed for me. Except it's not my signature. It's similar, but not mine. It was my first real lead, and I clutched at it like a straw. On the fourth day, I went to the address where she now lived with Ryan. It was just an apartment complex with manicured lawns and identical balconies. I didn't knock. I just looked. To the third floor. There was a drying rack with his shirts on it, familiar ones, from the ones he'd worn back at last year's agency holiday party where I'd first seen him. Then I thought, too smooth, too confident. I wasn't wrong. Through a lawyer, I filed a motion to block all transactions made during my absence. We attached evidence, fake signatures, deleted transactions, history of account logins from other people's IPs. It's neat. Cold. No hysteria. I didn't want blood. I wanted the truth. And I wanted everyone who thought they could erase a man with one button to realize that things don't always go according to plan. When I got back to my barracks, one of the guys said, "You're holding up better than most after a divorce." I grinned. That's because I'm not divorced. I'm fighting. And yes, that was exactly the fight. Not for money. It was for myself. For a name. Not to end my story as another check mark in someone else's plan. You know, I always thought the hardest thing was surviving gunfire. But it turns out it's just as hard to stay human after betrayal. When your home is no longer a place but an address in a database. When your family is an archive of letters. And your truth is something you have to prove with copies and signatures. But if you're reading this, it means I haven't given up. It means I'm still standing. And if I have to go through bureaucratic hell, through the courts, through the smiles of lawyers whose eyes are colder than drones on assignment, I will. Because I didn't come back in one piece to leave broken. And let only silence await me next, I will meet it on my terms. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay, you don't want to miss how it unfolded. I thought I would come home, open the door and hear my son running in screaming, "Daddy." That there would be the smell of coffee, that the chair by the window would still be mine. That no matter what, I would return to the same life I left in camouflage. But all I saw was a locked door, perfectly trimmed bushes, and a trash can set flat against the curb, as if I were just a passerby, not someone who paid for this house every month, even when I was bombed. I stood outside with a suitcase, a tired body, and a bunch of keys that didn't open anything else. The locks had been replaced. The house was for sale. I learned this from an agent who called my old number and asked if I would be willing to vacate the property for showings. Amazing, isn't it? I went to the bank. I thought it would be simple, explain that I co-own the account, show my veteran's ID, a couple of papers. The manager was young, nervous, flipped through the papers and then said, "All actions were confirmed by another co-owner. We're sorry." Sorry? I looked at her. She withdrew $82,000. That's not sorry. That's robbery. She lowered her eyes. She'd been taught not to argue. I was trained not to give up. I went to Andrew's office, my friend and lawyer. I brought printouts, bank statements, even old letters. He listened in silence. Then he said, "It's a scheme. It's not about feelings. It's an operation. She's a participant, he's a performer. I'm sure he's done this before. I'm not gonna let myself be crossed off. I'm not a file in the system. Then let's start with the statements." And his bio. Ryan Ellis turned out to be a sneaky little beast. No permanent address, no license, just scraps, profiles in deleted directories, archived copies from forums. Divorce counseling specialist, assisting with asset clearance. Everything's sterile. You can't dig into anything. But I didn't need everything. I needed a crack. I found it. A woman, Linda, left a post in a Yelp review. I was divorced like a girl. My husband and their agent did everything behind my back. I wasn't even called to court. I texted her. She responded a day later. We met at a packed cafe on the outskirts of Richmond. She told me. Same old story, deleted signatures, missing money, and the same guy who helped your ex. I started making a list. Copies of posts. Witnesses. And every night I updated it. Ryan wasn't just a romantic fling. He was a function. A program to weed out unwanted husbands. And he did it with a counselor's smile and an iPad under his arm. Christina wasn't answering her cell phone. I drove to the college where she taught classes. I waited outside. When she saw me, she froze. James? Hello. I thought you were going to say that to my face. We're over. You're living in the past. You pulled me out of your life like a tooth. No anesthesia. I was alone. I was scared. He helped. He stole. And you gave. Don't pretend it was about love. She walked away. She just turned around. But this time, no win-win. Because now I was collecting evidence. Now I'm not the injured party. I'm the plaintiff. Andrew filed a motion with the court. We included everything. Transactions, suspicious IP addresses, a fake signature on a power of attorney. I stood in the courtroom with a copy of the petition and felt like I was breathing for the first time in months. And if they think that's the end of it, they don't know who they're messing with. The next week I got busy looking for other victims. I wrote to 2 divorce forums, put up a post without names. Have you encountered a divorce counselor who acted through powers of attorney while you were away? There were 9 responses. 3 of them pointed out similar stories. One even remembered a name, Ryan. Polite, courteous, said he just wanted to help my wife close the case faster. I saved screenshots. Contacted them. One, Mike from North Carolina, agreed to talk via video link. He showed me his paperwork. It's the same old story, a wife who's tired of waiting, a friend who helped him sell some of his property. And then nothing. And no responsibility. He was still paying on the loan, even though the house belonged to a third party. In the meantime, Andrew made inquiries to the licensing authorities and the IRS. We found out that Ryan was registered as an independent consultant, but his registration had been suspended for failure to file financial statements. It's a small thing, but a trace. At the same time, I learned that my ex-spouse had moved into a new house again, not registered to her. The owner's name, 1J. Morrison, associated with the same agency where Ryan worked. Looks like they weren't just playing for sentiment, they were playing for assets. I went back to the bank. This time with a lawyer. We requested login logs, transaction routing, electronic signature certificates. The girl manager was no longer smiling. Now the head of the department was talking to us. He was looking at the papers and sweating. Because he realized he smelled a check. We have no authority to interfere in the decisions of clients, he began. What if the signatures are forged? We are ready to cooperate with the court and provide all the materials. Progress. Slow, but tangible. I tried talking to Christina again, just to understand some of the motive. But she blocked my number. But a new photo of her appeared online. Her on the veranda, glass of wine, caption, a new stage. New meaning. I looked at that scene like an archaeologist at a glossy fake. Too perfect. Too not real. I sat in my car, in the supermarket parking lot, and thought, you're not evil. You're not being vindictive. You just want the truth to take the floor. And then I got a call from Linda. It came up again. At a conference for marriage counselors. He's there under a different name, Richard Elwood. I recognized his voice. Are you sure? Positive. I recorded part of the conversation. You want some? I do. Very much so. We got the audio. Andrew sent it to forensics. It's a 92% match. Enough to trigger a hearing. We put it in the motion. Now we weren't just waiting. We pressed on. And so one early morning, I sat in an empty county courtroom. Gray tile, a shivering air conditioner, and the clerk's voice reading subpoenas. I held a binder of copies, letters, statements, an audio file, a Yelp printout, requests to the IRS. Each sheet was like a bullet. I was no longer just an ex-husband. I became the plaintiff, the witness, and, by golly, the hunter. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a tenacious gaze, flipped through the papers. If what you allege is confirmed, this goes beyond a family dispute. It could turn into a criminal case. I nodded. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Then it was evening. I walked down the street. For the first time in a long time, without anger. Not because I forgave, but because I realized that pain, like justice, must ripen. And today was the day it began to sprout. I don't know how it will end, but I do know this is not just my fight anymore. It's a matter of principle. Against schemes, against legitimate theft, against smiling scumbags in suits who think they can wipe you out of your bank account and off the face of the earth. And I'm still here. And I'm not leaving. The next morning, I was sitting in Andrew's kitchen. He poured me a strong cup of coffee, the kind that doesn't taste good, but wakes you up inside. We looked at the papers in silence. Then he said, "You know, if you weren't a stubborn ass like you were in the service, you'd be drinking cheap beer in a trailer right now, not trying to prove anything." "Maybe," I replied. "But then that donkey would have lost not only his money, but his face. And I don't forgive even myself for that. It wasn't really about her anymore. It wasn't about Ryan. It wasn't even about the bank. It was about not giving the world the right to make you nothing. You can't let someone make you disappear while you're on the job." When I got home, I opened an old box of army stuff. There was a locket Christina had given me before my first deployment. It said, "Come back in one piece." I twirled it in my fingers. It had faded, but I kept it in my pocket anyway. Not as a memory of her, but as a reminder I had survived. And now I'm back, not in the house, but in myself. And you know what I realized in that moment? Sometimes you have to pull the truth out through your teeth. But if you don't, no one will tell it for you. That's why I'm not backing down. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. On the day of the hearing, the sky was as gray as the bank manager's face when I asked who exactly confirmed the signature on the power of attorney on my behalf. Only the sky, unlike him, didn't try to dodge the answer. I came to court in an old army suit that held not only the uniform but also the smell of other people's blood, old sweat, and long hours without sleep. Not for pathos, just to remind myself where I came from and what I went through. Because sometimes the truth doesn't require facts, but the weight behind it. Christina sat with her lawyer in the corner of the room. All new, her hair was styled, her makeup was impeccable, her gaze was straight, like a person who had learned her lines in advance. She didn't look at me. Oh well, I was used to being invisible in her new life. When asked if she was aware of Ellis's actions, she shrugged. He was helping. I didn't know there was a problem. So you didn't know your ex-spouse was in a war zone? Ellis, I did know. But he chose to do it himself. Bingo. A phrase from the Golden Manual of Emotional Detachment. Sterile as a bank printout. And just as empty. But then I got the floor. "I'm not against divorce," I began. "People split up. It happens. But I don't mind being erased from my life under the guise of counseling. I don't want anyone profiting from my trust while I bandaged up people who'd had their legs blown off." I presented evidence, a forged signature, audio of Ryan under a different name, testimonials from other victims. I didn't raise my voice. Because the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It should be laid out like bullets on the table. The judge postponed the case until next week, but I could see she understood. Because her eyes weren't paper. And when she said, "The case requires further review under the criminal code," I felt, for the first time ever, that my words had weight. After the hearing, I walked outside. Christina caught up with me. "Do you really want to get all this out? The press, the tapes, the trial?" I turned around. "Did you want me to come home, see an empty bill, an empty house, and smile?" She didn't say a word. "You know," I added, "you could have just said, 'I'm out.' No lawyers, Without an agent. Without a play. I was scared. I was in Syria. You were in Richmond. We were both scared. But only one of us used it as an excuse to steal. She didn't say anything. And she left. Quickly. In heels. Across the pavement, like a stage. Only there was no applause. Back home, if you can call a rented apartment with stains on the ceiling and the smell of a microwave, I sat down on a stool, took out an old army flask, and just sat there. Stared at the wall. No TV, no phone. Just listening to the water running in the pipes. That's when you realize how much of your life now depends on paper. The next morning, I got a call from Andrew. We got a preliminary response from the Department of Licensing. Ryan Ellis is involved in 2 similar cases. Only now it's official. Criminal? Not yet. But the judge can refer the case to the DA's office if there's collusion. That's great. Don't get excited. You need to hold the line. They might start pushing through lawyers, stalling, making a big deal out of it. But if you hold out, we'll get you. And I did. At the preliminary hearing, there was audio, testimony from Linda and Mike, the same ones who'd already been in similar stories. And then a videotape from a conference where Ryan, under the name Richard Elwood, was giving a lecture on soft exit from toxic relationships. He spoke so well that the audience applauded. And my ears were ringing from the ease with which he spoke the words that masked the betrayal on the letterhead. The judge listened attentively. She flipped through the papers. And then she said, "The court finds it necessary to temporarily restrain all assets involved in the case, including accounts, real estate, and powers of attorney." And that's when Christine turned pale. Because for the first time ever, something wasn't working. And her, "I didn't know he helped" world had cracked. After the meeting, I didn't go near her. I didn't even look. I looked at the people in the audience. Some of them were just gawkers. But one, a veteran, judging by his scar and demeanor, nodded at me. Almost imperceptibly. But I realized I was not alone. A week later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. The voice was hoarse, tired. The man identified himself as Detective Foster. "We've been through the files. Ellis doesn't have a valid license, but he does have a trail of electronic traces. He's used the same scheme in at least 4 cases. What does that mean? That means we have grounds to open a criminal investigation. But we need one more detail: direct financial gain. Can you prove he took a percentage of the deals? Give me 2 days." I contacted Mike. He was going through his wife's archived letters. Found a letter from Ryan promising to finalize the process for 4% of the property value. That was enough. When we brought it to the DA, he just nodded. "That's it. We're taking the case. Ryan Ellis is on trial." And me? I just went to the old gym that night. Not to work out. Just sat in the locker room, smelling sweat and plastic and life. The way it is, not glossy, not retouched, not with other people's signatures. Then I went home and sat down to write a petition to renegotiate the divorce. Because if I'm going to tear off the masks, I'm going to go all the way. 2 days later, I got a subpoena for Ryan. He didn't look so confident in the courtroom. His hair was sloppy, his eyes were running. His lawyer tried to drag the case out. But the judge, the one with the tenacious gaze, said, "That's enough. We'll proceed to trial on the merits." After the hearing, he walked past me. For the first time, without a smile. "You're ruining your life," he muttered. "I'm patching up what you tried to steal. I'm not a hero. And I'm not a vigilante. But there are times when to remain silent is complicity. And I chose to speak. And so, on the day of the last session, I found myself back in the same place, with the same file, but with a different feeling. Now it wasn't a defense. It was a final attack. The judge heard testimony from all sides. There was a silence in which you could hear someone in the audience's fingers clench in their lap. Then she said, "Signs of a fraudulent scheme realized through trust and abuse of legal instruments have been established. The materials are being transferred to the prosecutor's office." Christina didn't look in my direction. The lawyer quickly gathered the papers. Ryan was the first to leave. Down the hall. Small steps. Like a man who had suddenly run out of roads. I stayed seated. Not because I was tired, but because it became quiet inside. It wasn't empty. It was like after a storm. It's still wet, but it's light. That night I went to the park. I sat down on the bench where I used to walk with my son. I had that flask with me. I didn't drink it. I just held it, remembering who I was. And who I'd become. I didn't go back in time. I was pushed into another future. But in that future, I'm no longer a victim. A month later, I got a letter. From a woman I didn't know. The Veterans Organization had published an excerpt from my story. You don't know me, but I read everything. You didn't just fight. You showed that giving up is a choice. Thank you. I closed the letter. I smiled. And realized, everything I had done was not for nothing. Now I don't live in the house or the past or the bills. I live in myself. And that's the strongest support that no one can take away. A week after everything, I came to the local veterans organization. There, among people who knew what it was to lose without showing tears, I wanted for the first time to just be. Without fighting. No defense. Just being. I signed up to volunteer. Not because I wanted to save the world, but because I realized my story is not an exception. It's part of the system. And if I went through it, maybe I could help those who are still at the bottom. Now I do meetings. No tie. With simple words. Telling you how to keep the world from rewriting you in parentheses. How to stand up when you're at zero. How to not become a silent disappearance in someone else's plan. And every time I look into the eyes of those listening, I see something in them that I didn't see in the eyes of bank clerks, lawyers, and exes. Respect. Not pity. Respect. This is my new home. My walls. My answer to everyone who wanted me to disappear into silence. I'm here. And I'm staying.